In HBO's supernatural drama True Blood, based on the Southern Vampire Mysteries novels by Charlaine Harris, the world is filled with a diverse array of fantastical creatures, vampires, werewolves, shapeshifters, and witches, to name a few. However, one of the most fascinating and controversial groups in the show is the Fairies, a race that isn't prominently explored until later seasons. Viewers often find themselves asking the question, were the fairies in True Blood truly evil? The short answer is, it depends on how you define evil. In True Blood, fairies are portrayed as morally ambiguous, with both benevolent and malevolent characteristics. While they are not portrayed as purely evil beings, their actions and motivations certainly raise ethical questions. Fairies in True Blood are not the tiny, delicate, and whimsical creatures many people associate with the term fairy. Instead, they are portrayed as powerful, ethereal beings with immense magical abilities, especially regarding light manipulation and teleportation. In the show's lore, the fairies originate from a parallel dimension, and they possess an ancient, almost godlike aura, with a hierarchy and culture vastly different from those of humans or other supernatural creatures. One of the key elements of the fairies in True Blood is their relationship with vampires. Fairy blood is intoxicating and incredibly desirable to vampires, making fairies both prey and a dangerous threat to the vampire race. This relationship adds a layer of tension to the fairies' interactions with the other supernatural factions in the show. At first glance, many fairies in True Blood seem benevolent and kind-hearted. For instance, Sookie Stackhouse, the main character of the show, is revealed to be part fairy, and she uses her fairy abilities to help those around her. Sookie's powers, including telepathy and the ability to harness light, often position her as a protagonist, someone trying to protect her friends and loved ones from the constant dangers they face in Bon Temps. Similarly, Claudine Crane, a fairy that appears in the 4th season, tries to bring Sookie into the fairy world to protect her from the vampires. The fairies, in this context, seem concerned with their survival, as well as the well-being of those with fairy blood who are vulnerable to vampires. However, as the series progresses, we see more of the dark side of fairy society. While the fairies in True Blood aren't exactly evil, they certainly exhibit questionable behaviors and motivations that complicate their moral standing. One of the most prominent examples is Mab, the fairy queen introduced in Season 4. Mab is initially portrayed as a leader determined to protect her people from vampire predation. However, her methods raise serious moral questions. Mab tries to trap Sookie in the fairy world against her will, showcasing a level of manipulation and control that suggests the fairy's noble intentions are tainted by a darker agenda. Rather than helping Sookie out of pure goodwill, Mab seeks to exploit Sookie's powers for her own gain, treating her more like a resource than a person. Moreover, Claude, another fairy who helps Sookie navigate the complexities of her fairy heritage, eventually reveals the fairy's broader ambitions. Throughout the series, it becomes apparent that the fairies are willing to use violence, deception, and other morally grey tactics to further their goals. The seemingly altruistic exterior of the fairy realm hides a darker undercurrent, where personal survival and the preservation of their kind take precedence over individual freedoms. In addition, many lesser-known fairies act with selfish intent, manipulating and deceiving Sookie and other characters in the series. They show an inherent distrust of other supernatural beings and humans, often acting out of self-interest or as part of a larger conspiracy. The fairies in True Blood embody a level of moral ambiguity. While they do have a vested interest in their own survival, their interactions with others, especially humans and vampires, often take a dark turn. The survivalist mentality in the fairy realm promotes a form of xenophobia and elitism, where the well-being of fairies is prioritized above all else, even at the expense of other species. Their actions are not motivated by malevolence in the way traditional villains might be, but by a sense of preservation that occasionally borders on ruthlessness. While fairies like Sookie or Claudine show compassion and empathy, many others like Mab exhibit manipulative, self-serving behavior that pushes the boundaries of what could be considered moral. The fairies' distrust of vampires also leads to a series of conflicts that put innocent people in harm's way. Their history of subjugation by vampires has embittered them, causing them to strike first or act defensively in ways that can harm others. As such, they are less evil in the traditional sense and more morally complex, with actions that oscillate between heroism and villainy depending on the circumstances. So, were the fairies in True Blood evil? Not exactly. Instead, they occupy a morally gray space, driven by self-preservation and their own agenda. Their benevolence towards their own kind contrasts with their coldness and manipulative tendencies towards others. In that sense, the fairies of True Blood aren't the charming or whimsical creatures found in most popular fairy tales. They are dangerous, powerful, and willing to go to great lengths to protect themselves, even at the expense of others. Ultimately, the fairies' actions in True Blood force the viewer to reconsider the traditional dichotomy of good and evil. Like many of the supernatural creatures in the show, they are complex beings shaped by their experiences, motivations, and survival instincts. In True Blood, fairies are not a force of pure evil, but they're far from innocent, leaving viewers to judge where they fall on the moral spectrum.